Hey there, and welcome to Rukifelo. I'm here to tackle the questions that keep you up at night, the topics that spark heated debates at dinner tables. And today we're diving into one of the most controversial questions in modern history. Who are the real owners of the land of Israel? Now, before you start typing furiously in the comments, hear me out. This isn't about taking sides or pushing any political agenda. This is about understanding history, examining claims, and looking at the facts that have shaped one of the world's most complex conflicts. The truth is, this question has been debated for over a century, and the answer isn't as simple as you might think. We're talking about competing historical narratives, ancient connections, modern politics, and the lives of millions of people who call this land home. So buckle up, because we're about to take a journey through 4,000 years of history to understand how different peoples have claimed ownership of this small but incredibly significant piece of land. Let's start where many people start this conversation, with the Bible. According to Jewish, Christian, and Islamic traditions, God promised the land of Canaan to Abraham and his descendants around 2000 BCE. This is what Jews call the Promised Land, and it forms the foundation of the Jewish claim to Israel. But here's where it gets interesting and complicated. Abraham had two sons, Isaac and Ishmael. Jews trace their lineage through Isaac, while many Arabs trace theirs through Ishmael. So both peoples can point to Abraham as their ancestor and claim divine promise to the same land. The Jewish connection deepened over centuries. Jacob, Isaac's son, was renamed Israel, and his 12 sons became the 12 tribes of Israel. By 1000 BCE, King David had established Jerusalem as the capital of a united Jewish kingdom. His son Solomon built the first temple, making Jerusalem the spiritual center of Judaism. This is crucial to understand. For Jews, this isn't just about politics or territory. Jerusalem has been their holiest city for 3,000 years. Every day, religious Jews pray facing Jerusalem. Every Passover, they say next year in Jerusalem. Even during 2,000 years of exile, they never stopped considering this their homeland. But, and this is important, the Israelites weren't the only people living there. The Bible itself mentions Canaanites, Philistines, Jebusites, and other tribes who inhabited the land. So from the very beginning, this was a region with multiple peoples, multiple claims, and multiple stories. The first major disruption came in 586 BCE when the Babylonians destroyed Jerusalem and the First Temple, taking many Jews into exile. Then in 70 CE, the Romans destroyed the Second Temple and brutally suppressed Jewish revolts. Most Jews were killed, enslaved, or fled, beginning what we call the diaspora, the scattering of Jewish people across the world. Here's what's remarkable. Most ancient peoples, when they lost their homeland, eventually disappeared from history. But Jews maintained their identity, their religion, their language, and their connection to this specific land for nearly 2,000 years of exile. Now let's look at the other major claim to this land. After the Roman period, the region was controlled by various empires. But the most significant change came in 638 CE when Arab Muslim armies conquered Jerusalem. For Muslims, Jerusalem isn't just any city. It's Al-Quds, the third holiest site in Islam. According to Islamic tradition, Prophet Muhammad made his night journey from Mecca to Jerusalem, and from there ascended to heaven. The Dome of the Rock and Al-Aqsa Mosque, built on the same site where the Jewish temples once stood, commemorate this event. Over the following centuries, the population of Palestine became predominantly Arab and Muslim. These weren't just conquering armies passing through. Families settled, built communities, farmed the land, and established deep roots. By the time of the Ottoman Empire, which controlled the region from 1517 to 1917, the population was roughly 85% Arab Muslim, 10% Arab Christian, and 5% Jewish. This Arab population developed their own connection to the land. They built villages, tended olive groves that some families had maintained for centuries, and created a distinct Palestinian identity. Their great-grandparents were buried in this soil, Their children played in these fields. This was home. So by the early 1900s, you had two peoples with legitimate connections to the same land. Jews with an ancient historical and religious connection maintained through 2,000 years of exile, and Arabs with 1,300 years of continuous residence and cultural development. Neither group was making up their connection. Both had real, deep ties to this place. And that's where the conflict begins, not because one side is right and the other is wrong, but because both sides are right in different ways. By the late 1800s, Jews in Europe were facing a crisis. Despite attempts at assimilation, anti-Semitism was growing. The Dreyfus Affair in France, pogroms in Russia, and systemic discrimination across Europe convinced many Jews that they would never be truly accepted in European society. This led to the birth of modern Zionism, led by Theodor Herzl. Zionists argued that Jews needed their own homeland where they could be safe and free. But why Palestine specifically? Why not Argentina or Uganda or any other available territory? The answer lies in that ancient connection I mentioned earlier. For 2,000 years, Jews had been praying to return to Zion, Jerusalem. Their liturgy, their holidays, their entire religious calendar was oriented around this specific place. No other location could unite Jews from around the world in the same way. The first wave of Jewish immigration began in the 1880s, mainly Jews fleeing Russian pogroms. They found a land that was sparsely populated. The entire region had maybe 400,000 people, and largely underdeveloped under Ottoman rule. These early Zionist settlers weren't conquering armies. They were refugees buying land, often at inflated prices, from Ottoman landowners. They faced enormous challenges: malaria, hostile neighbors, difficult terrain. Many died trying to establish agricultural communities in swamps and deserts. But they were driven by a powerful dream: to rebuild their ancient homeland after 2,000 years of exile. They revived Hebrew as a spoken language, established schools, built cities. They saw themselves as coming home, not as colonizers. The problem was that the existing Arab population saw it very differently. To them, these were foreign immigrants changing the character of their homeland. Land that Arab tenant farmers had worked for generations was being sold by absentee Ottoman landlords to Jewish immigrants. Both perspectives were understandable. Jews saw themselves as indigenous people returning home. Arabs saw themselves as indigenous people being displaced by foreigners. World War I changed everything. The Ottoman Empire collapsed, and Britain took control of Palestine. In 1917, the British issued the Balfour Declaration, supporting the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people, while also pledging that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine. This was Britain trying to have it both ways, supporting Jewish aspirations while protecting Arab rights. The problem was these commitments were potentially contradictory. How do you establish a Jewish national home without affecting the rights of the Arab majority? During the 1920s and 1930s, Jewish immigration increased dramatically, especially after the Nazis came to power. By 1936, Jews made up about 30% of Palestine's population, up from maybe 10% in 1900. This wasn't just gradual demographic change. It was rapid transformation that alarmed the Arab population. Arabs launched a major revolt from 1936 to 1939, demanding an end to Jewish immigration and land sales. The British brutally suppressed the revolt, but also imposed severe restrictions on Jewish immigration, just as Jews were desperately trying to escape Nazi Europe. Here's the tragedy. Both peoples had legitimate grievances. Jews were fleeing for their lives and being turned away from their ancestral homeland. Arabs were watching their demographic majority disappear and their political aspirations ignored. The Holocaust made everything more urgent and more tragic. 6 million Jews were murdered, 1/3 of all Jews worldwide. For survivors, Palestine wasn't just a dream anymore. It was literally the only place many could go. Britain and America had closed their doors. Palestine was their only refuge. But this also meant that the Palestinian Arabs were being asked to pay the price for European crimes they had nothing to do with. Why should they give up their homeland to accommodate refugees from European persecution? By 1947, Britain couldn't handle the Palestine problem anymore and turned it over to the United Nations. The UN proposed partitioning Palestine into separate Jewish and Arab states, with Jerusalem under international control. The partition plan gave Jews about 55% of the land, even though they were only 33% of the population. Jews accepted the plan. They were desperate for any internationally recognized homeland. Arabs rejected it, arguing it was unfair to give away their land to accommodate European refugees. On May 14, 1948, David Ben-Gurion declared Israeli independence. Within hours, 5 Arab armies invaded, determined to prevent the establishment of a Jewish state. This was the moment when competing ownership claims became a life-and-death struggle. For Jews, this was about survival. Defeat could mean annihilation just 3 years after the Holocaust. For Arabs, this was about preventing what they saw as the theft of their homeland. Israel survived the war, but at enormous cost to both sides. About 6,000 Jews died, 1% of the entire Jewish population of Palestine. But the Arab cost was even higher. Approximately 700,000 Palestinians became refugees, fleeing or being expelled from their homes. This refugee crisis created the modern Palestinian national identity. Before 1948, Palestinians thought of themselves primarily as Arabs or as residents of particular villages or regions. The shared experience of displacement created a distinct Palestinian nationalism focused on return to their homeland. Meanwhile, something else happened that gets less attention. Between 1948 and 1970, about 850,000 Jews were expelled or fled from Arab countries where they'd lived for centuries. Most came to Israel, creating a massive population exchange that's often forgotten in discussions of conflict. So by 1949, you had two displaced peoples, Palestinian Arabs scattered across refugee camps, and Middle Eastern Jews building new lives in Israel. Both had lost homes, both had suffered trauma, but only one had a state. Fast forward to today, and the ownership question has become even more complex. Israel controls all of historic Palestine, but the population is almost evenly split. About 7 million Jews and 7 million Arabs, including those in Gaza and the West Bank. In the West Bank, over 600,000 Israeli settlers now live alongside 3 million Palestinians. These settlements are considered illegal under international law, but many Israeli settlers argue they're simply living in the historical heartland of ancient Israel, Judea, and Samaria. Gaza presents a different situation. Israel withdrew all settlers and soldiers in 2005, but maintains a blockade due to security concerns about Hamas. Palestinians argue they're trapped in an open-air prison. Israelis argue they're defending themselves against terrorist attacks. Jerusalem, meanwhile, remains the most sensitive issue. It's the holiest city for Jews, the third holiest for Muslims, and sacred to Christians too. Both Israelis and Palestinians claim it as their capital. Solomon's temple stood there 3,000 years ago, but so did the Dome of the Rock for 1,300 years. So, who owns this land today? Legally, Israel controls most of it through internationally recognized sovereignty within the 1967 borders or military occupation in the West Bank and East Jerusalem. But legal control isn't the same as moral or historical ownership. The current reality is that millions of people call this land home. Jews whose families survived the Holocaust or fled Arab persecution, Palestinians whose families lived there for generations, Israeli Arabs who never left, Jewish settlers who moved to the West Bank, Palestinian refugees dreaming of return. Each group has compelling reasons for claiming ownership. Holocaust survivors who built kibbutzim from swamps. Palestinian grandmothers who still have keys to houses that no longer exist. Jewish families who've prayed in Jerusalem for centuries. Palestinian families who farmed the same olive groves for generations. So who are the real owners of the land of Israel? After this journey through history, I hope you can see why there's no simple answer. Jews have a 3,000-year connection to this land, maintained through 2,000 years of exile and persecution. Palestinians have over 1,000 years of continuous residence and deep cultural ties. Both peoples have shed blood for this land. Both have built their identities around it, and both have legitimate claims that can't simply be dismissed. The tragedy isn't that one side is wrong. It's that both sides are right, and their rightness has led to a century of conflict that has cost hundreds of thousands of lives. Maybe the real question isn't who owns this land, but how can ownership be shared? How can Israelis have security and Palestinians have freedom? How can Jews maintain their connection to Zion while Palestinians realize their dreams of statehood? History shows us that enemies can become partners, that seemingly impossible conflicts can find resolution. But it requires both sides to acknowledge the other's legitimate connection to this land, to move beyond zero-sum thinking, and to prioritize the future over the past. What do you think? Can two people share one homeland? Is the two-state solution still possible? Let me know in the comments below. And if this video helped you understand this complex issue, please hit that like button and subscribe to Rukifelo for more deep dives into the stories that shape our world. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.